Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and we've got more NBA Draft Day trades in this video. The last video was very well received and a lot of feedback in that video as well in the comment section and also with the like rate. So I wanted to bring even more NBA Draft Day trades today, but we're switching up the style of the video. Last time I made a bunch of trades that I thought could potentially go down, but the comment section seems to love to give their own ideas as well. So I want to share some trades that our viewers commented. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe for more content like this video today. It's been a ton of fun covering the NBA draft, and a little disclaimer here: after the draft, we've got a lot of other fun stuff planned, including 2023 NBA draft prep already. I've been spending time watching those players, making sure I'm ready to talk about the 2023 NBA draft the moment the 2022 NBA draft finalizes. So now let's jump into it here. Huge shout out to those who did comment in some of our other videos and also on some of the community posts. Really do appreciate it. Leave more comments for a potential future video titled Even More NBA Draft Day Trades. Not exactly sure if that's going to 100% come out. It's going to depend on the level of comments we get, how many comments we get, and if there's some good trade ideas in there that I would like to talk about, because I do read every single comment and then I go through and handpick which ones I really want to talk about. So in today's video, we got 6, and we're starting here with Jared's, and he says Blazers trade down for the 2 Hornets picks. And I think this is a pretty frequently seen trade. I think a lot of people are looking for a trade like this to happen, where Portland, who's picking 7th overall in this year's draft, would maybe want to move down to 13 and 15 with Charlotte to pick up a little bit more depth and add to the overall feel of their roster. And here, Charlotte maybe gets to move up for a guy like Jalen Duren to be their long-term starting center, or another player that maybe they have identified on their board that they would love to add to their current roster. And it's a pretty good way for Charlotte to take advantage of having 2 draft assets where they move back up into the top 10. They're so close to being a playoff team that maybe they could push forward. Now, for me, if I was actually in the GM chair for either of these teams, if I'm Charlotte just looking at this class, even though I think it's a very deep and talented class, I would make this move if I'm confident that I can get Jalen Duren. I am very high on Duren myself. If it comes down to draft night, we're on the clock at 7. Portland's offering this pick to me, and I know Duren's out there. I'm taking it. And for me, if I'm Portland, I would be hesitant doing that because I think Jalen Duren would be a really nice selection for them. I also think there's some other players, but I can understand it from also Joe Cronin's perspective of the Portland Trailblazers on why. You're looking at a timeline built around a guy who's in his 30s already in Damian Lillard, who you're trying to win a championship with. And does one guy who, like Jalen Duren maybe, who you have to wait a couple of years for him to really get to the point where he wants to be a super impactful NBA player, does that move the needle for you right now? And for Portland, I think this could become a dangerous game, because if you draft for right now and then say a year or 2 from now, Damian Lillard either regresses a little bit because of age or isn't healthy or perhaps wants out of Portland, you've really sacrificed your future, and it might become the identifying factor of what Joe Cronin's time in Portland looks like, really based on this draft. If he moves down and you draft 2 guys who are more NBA ready style, maybe look at a guy like EJ Liddell and maybe a guy like Ochai Agbaji, 2 potential picks for the Blazers if they were to have 13 and 15. You look at that and say those are pretty good players, but they're good players in the idea that you have Damian Lillard to build around. If you lose him, either due to injury again or regression, or he wants out, it looks really shaky. And perhaps you look at yourself and say, yeah, we traded the rights to Jalen Duren to try and win now, and we couldn't get it done. It could really hurt the Blazers' long-term future. For me, if I was Portland, I would probably not move down from 7 myself, but I could see the appeal here specifically with what their intentions are in that front office of trying to win now. I think it's a pretty logical trade. I think it's something that maybe we could see go down on draft night. Moving from 13 to 7 does cost you another first-round pick. I think that's about requisite value. So Jared, overall, I think a pretty decent trade idea. I know this is a common one that other subscribers had looked at as well. And just a quick disclaimer here too, you're going to see 15 hours ago on the comment there. I am recording this video days in advance, so this is a very old comment at this point that you're actually watching the video. It was on the community poll, but overall, again, I'm really excited to be doing this video, so hopefully you understand that I'm scheduling it out ahead of time. Here we are now with another trade, and we're staying on the topic of the Charlotte Hornets, and we're actually going to include 13 and 15 again, And I think Charlotte's going to be one of those teams that a lot of people identify as a potential trade team, where they're going to look to be aggressive, maybe upgrade their roster. And this is an interesting one to me here from Doob. I believe he's been commenting on the channel for quite some time, so a huge shout out to him. And you look at what Charlotte is doing here. They trade pick 13, pick 15, and the Gordon Hayward contract, which a lot of people look at as a negative right now. I don't think it's as far of a negative as people say, but the biggest issue here is he just hasn't stayed healthy. When he plays, he's a good player, and the Hornets do miss him when he's not out on the floor. I don't think there's any question about that. The only issue is his consistency in terms of staying healthy. For Utah, you get a reunion here of Gordon Hayward, who ultimately, I don't think they would really want him in this deal, but the idea here is you're giving up Gobert for 13 and 15. For me, even though I think this is an intriguing trade offer, if I'm the Utah Jazz, I am not trading Rudy Gobert for a back-end lottery pick and the first pick outside of the lottery. Even though I think this is a very good class, I think there's some really good players there that could help Utah, I'm not giving up Rudy Gobert to do that. I would be more motivated myself to maybe trade Bogdanovic, move Mike Conley if I can, and make a few other moves. The interesting thing as well is Utah does not have a first-round pick this year, so if they do have two guys on their board that they really like, which is a possibility because remember the Danny Ainge hiring does kind of change the trajectory of this franchise. He loves draft picks. He really does. He's shown that with his tenure in Boston. And I wouldn't put it past him to be aggressive trying to move up back into this year's first round after coming in and, really receiving a product that did not have a first round pick. He did not make the Mike Conley trade. Their other GM did. And now him as president of basketball operations, he's going to look to maybe right some of the wrongs. But for me here, ultimately, I don't think trading Gobert for 13 and 15 is enough. I think that you would need more simply because you're talking about a guy who's 6-time all defense, 3-time defensive player of the year, probably had a real case to be defensive player of the year again this year. And all in all, he's just the overall defensive scheme for Utah. So the fact that you're giving him up to Charlotte, that's tough. Charlotte would become an instant playoff team with this deal. This fixes almost all of Charlotte's issues. You get a phenomenal screen setter, one of the best, if not the best rim protector in the NBA, a phenomenal rebounder, and really does tie everything together for Charlotte. So, I mean, if they really want to do something like this, where they want to get off Hayward and bring in Gobert in the same deal, if they want to go, if they want to go a little bit further in the future and attach even more assets, I wouldn't blame them for that. Gobert's still in his late 20s. It's not like he's that old of a player. I think he'll age fairly well, not super well, but fairly well. And I think when you look at Charlotte, if the goal is to push into the postseason as soon as possible with LaMelo Ball and assuming they retain Miles Bridges, I think Gobert is the perfect complement to those two guys. Moving on to our next trade now, and this one comes from Bruce. So thank you, Bruce, for the comment. He says Houston receives PJ Washington and the 13th pick, so another deal here including Charlotte and the 13th overall selection. And in turn, the Hornets receive Christian Wood, who's been a very hot name, Jayshawn Tate, who was a really nice pickup out of the NBL. He's already around 25 years old, but he's been playing pretty good basketball for the Houston Rockets the last couple seasons. And then pick 17. So here, Houston gets to move up 4 picks, and they also get PJ Washington. And out goes Jayshawn Tate and Christian Wood. And I think this is decent value again for both sides. Christian Wood is a definite improvement over PJ Washington. So again, Charlotte, who's trying to make a playoff push, could sell themselves on this. The one concern I have here, though, Christian Wood does not play a lick of defense. I think his defensive presence is rather questionable. And I think ultimately, yes, he's a skilled offensive player. Yes, he'd be a phenomenal offensive fit around LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges. But defensively, I've got my concerns there already in Charlotte. And I think a Christian Wood acquisition, although it's intriguing, is not something I would opt to do if I was in the shoes of Mitch Kupchak, the GM there in Charlotte. But again, I think the value is here. I think the value lines up. And for Houston, you could understand why. You get off a player who's starting to get into his late 20s in Wood. You bring in a younger player in PJ Washington, who's in his early 20s, around 24 years old right now. You also get to move up in this year's draft. Probably guarantees you a better option between a guy like Ochai Agbaji, who we already talked about in this video, or maybe even a Jeremy Sohan. Could probably lock you up Tari Eason if that's who you really want. And it does cost you Jayshawn Tate to do it. Ultimately, I don't think this deal gets done, Bruce, but I think it's a pretty good comment and an intriguing trade offer for sure. Then moving into the next one, staying on the topic of the Houston Rockets and Christian Wood, Owen Hurst here says Rockets get the 7th overall pick from Portland. So we're heading back to the Trailblazers discussion here. And the Trailblazers get Christian Wood and pick 17. And now this is one that makes a little bit more sense to me than even the one we talked about earlier with pick 13 and 15 for 7, because if you're giving up 7, getting 13 and 15, there's no guarantee that those players contribute right away. Even if you go with the Agbaji and Liddell route like we talked about, it's very possible that, they're still going to be rookies, right? They're going to have to adjust a little bit to the NBA. We know Christian Wood's a good NBA player, specifically offensively, and you also get pick 17 back here. So you still have a first round pick in a deep class where you can maybe add some more talent. And yes, Mike Schmitz is hired there to Portland. He's technically not going to have as much influence as people, I think, are assuming going into this draft. I think long-term, he's going to have a ton of influence and he's going to be an awesome hire for them. And he's a phenomenal analyst. He did a great job at ESPN. There's no denying any of that. But I think this draft, he's not going to have as much influence as people think. I think he'll have minor influence, even though he's not technically working for them yet. He's going to have conversations with Joe Cronin. He's just going to. But here for me, the reason why if I'm Portland, I'm not doing this, the concern is defensively. Again, you have Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons. The two of those guys are not going to be contributors to a good defense. Christian Wood, in my opinion, is not going to contribute to a good overall team defense as well. And Chauncey Billups, that's what he wants to do. He was a defensive-minded point guard first. He won a championship with the Detroit Pistons, playing phenomenal defense. And I think ultimately in Portland, his tenure as head coach is going to be decided by how well he builds a defense. And the Christian Wood answer to me is not what gets the job done. I think it's a fit in terms of positional need. And I still think they need more skill set into that front court for sure. But I don't think Christian Wood is the guy to get it done. For me, if I was Portland, I would probably turn down this offer as well. Although it's not a bad idea. Owen, I do like the comment here, and I do appreciate your guys' comments in general. Then moving on here to another deal that maybe makes a little bit more sense here for Portland. And I think it was a really nice comment. It says Pacers get Bledsoe, who has a non-guaranteed deal. Just a little bit of cap movement here. Keon Johnson, who is a former first-round pick from the Clippers. They got him in the Norm Powell trade last year. The 7th overall selection and a Bucks 2025 first-round pick. And in return, the Portland Trailblazers get Malcolm Brogdon and Miles Turner. And now you have to look at this and say, this is a pretty good offer, I think, for both sides. You see the commenter here said, don't think the Blazers take it, but I love it for the Pacers. I think it's a pretty good outcome for both, honestly. I really do believe that, because when you think about Indiana here, they already have pick 6. Brogdon probably feeling like you can move on from him simply because they were able to bring in Halliburton in the Sabonis trade. And they also like Chris Duarte a lot, who they took in the lottery last year. Brogdon probably going to become the odd man out there, just given the age and timeline of this roster. And then giving up Miles Turner, he's the real value piece here. He's a dynamic big who can protect the rim, step out, knock down three-point shots with consistency. He's an underrated screen and roll guy. And I think ultimately one of the more underrated players in the NBA. If it weren't for trade discussions, he wouldn't get talked about very much. Honestly, a lot of people love to bring him up in, trade machines and everything like that. But I don't think enough people really recognize how good of an overall player he is, because statistically his numbers don't jump off the page to you besides the blocks. But I think all in all, he's a Brook Lopez type of player. And I mean that in the best way possible, where we've seen Brook Lopez really step up his performance defensively specifically since getting to Milwaukee. And I think Miles Turner is a player who has a very similar impact, and it's a good impact. It's one that helps win basketball games. And for me here, Portland, again, if you're trying to build a winning team, Brogdon, you play him as one of your combo guards next to Damian Lillard. Probably bring Anthony Simons off the bench, which I know Blazers fans won't like that I said that, but that's not a bad thing either. Think about having just more guard talent on the floor. I think Brogdon defensively is a better fit next to Dame than Simons. Again, it's about building a defensive identity here, and you bring in a really nice rim protector, something Portland just has not had. Yusuf Nurkic is not a bad defender. He's not a terrible defender, but he doesn't have the vertical element to really challenge at the rim like a Miles Turner does. And I think ultimately the upgrade in athleticism here would be highly noticeable in Portland's team defense. And it would give Chauncey Billups a little bit more leeway with what he wants to do on the perimeter, not having to be so concerned about the interior side of the game, knowing that he's got Miles Turner back there to protect the rim. I think these two teams would probably finagle over that Bucks 2025 first, probably fight over protections on it. I'm sure the Pacers would want it 100% in the deal, and I'm sure the Blazers would say, hey, we're already giving you a pick 7, probably don't want to give you the 2025 first. And then I think they probably would settle on some type of lottery protection or something along those lines. Or maybe it's, top 20 protected and it conveys to 2 second rounders if it doesn't convey, basically. And I think either way here, you're looking at pick 7 really being the sweepstakes here for Indiana. You get Keon Johnson. Okay, that doesn't really move the needle for me looking at Indiana's situation. But what does move the needle for me is the idea of maybe drafting a Shaden Sharp and a Keegan Murray, or a Keegan Murray and a Benedict Mathurin, or maybe even a Jalen Duren now that Miles Turner's out the door, and a Benedict Mathurin. That's what moves the needle for me. I love the idea there of getting a combination of young players to put next to Tyrese Halliburton and saying, we usually don't rebuild here in Indiana, but this is going to be a quick rebuild. Tyrese Halliburton, he's an awesome young player. We feel good about Duarte. We've still got Buddy Hield we can maybe move in a deal if a team gets really needy for shooting. We've also now got 2 top 7 picks at our disposal to either try and move up with, or maybe we sit here, maybe they move down even from 6 or 7, a couple spots down to say like 9 or 10, and then bring in a couple extra assets as well and really try and load this thing up. I think it's an intriguing option here for Indiana, even if that Bucks 2025 first is not included. And then another deal here, and this one focuses on the Orlando Magic and Oklahoma City Thunder, coming from Guerrero Antiguo. So thank you so much for the comment. He says Orlando trades number 1 overall and pick number 35 to the Oklahoma City Thunder for the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft and a first rounder in either 2023 or 2024. And for Orlando, you'd have to ask, okay, so why are they motivated to move down here? And it's that extra first round pick. Orlando already has 2 first round picks in the 2023 NBA draft, thanks to the trade with the Chicago Bulls, sending Vucevic out to Chicago. And they can make it 3 if they were to pull off a deal like this. Or if they were to move back to 2024, you could set yourself up to have 2 picks in 2023 and 2 picks in 2024, which would be a pretty nice outcome for them. And you only move down 1 spot. And if you're kind of split on the Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith decision, you're guaranteed to get one of them, 2nd overall. And the idea here for Oklahoma City, why would they want to move up? Well, first of all, they've got so many first round picks, they won't even notice that one of them goes out the door here in this deal. Let's be honest about that. They have more first round picks than they have roster spots. At some point, they're going to have to move up. And if they're really sold on who they want number 1 overall, say they really want Chet Holmgren, or say they really want Jabari Smith, and they feel like Orlando might take the guy they really want, this is a pretty low cost way to move up. You also get back pick 35 in this draft, which gives you a little bit more flexibility to maybe move out to a couple of years from now, get a couple second rounders back in a deal like that. Oklahoma City here, I think this is a really interesting trade, and one we usually don't see, where teams 1 and 2 flip. That almost never happens. I'm not even sure if it's ever happened. But here for Oklahoma City, I do think it makes some sense if they really are sold on one of the top 2 guys. If they really want Jabari or they really want Chet, they should be aggressive and go get the guy. That's the point of making all of these trades that they've made. They've got a cabinet of ammunition to make a move for a deal that gives them the player that they really want. And first overall, they could take any player in this year's class, obviously. It could set them up for a ton of success. In Orlando, you'd have to love the long-term aspect here of, hey, we're going to get one of the 2 guys anyways that we like, and we get an extra future first. Why not do this deal? I think it does make a lot of sense for both sides the more I talk about it. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, leave a like. Also subscribe to the channel for more NBA draft content. If you're still watching at this point of the video, please comment NBA draft day trades. That'll let me know that you got to this point of the video. Again, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy, subscribe, leave a like, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.